Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. This is Shyam Kapoor here. Welcome to the doubt resolution session. Let's check the doubts that you people have mailed to us, and let's solve the questions or let's resolve the doubts one by one. Now, what I'll do is many of you will start asking me, sir, I had asked a doubt about the syllabus, etc., etc. I'm not discussing that. We'll go, let's say chapter by chapter or doubt by doubt. But whatever are general doubts, for example, some of you have asked, sir, which book to read, right? How much to read, etc. We'll resolve those kind of questions at the end. And so let's go chapter by chapter. Let's say concept by concept. Then at the end, we'll have a discussion regarding the general doubts. Okay, what is the need for using other countries' currencies as a medium of exchange for trade? Right. So the first question is, why should we use other currencies whenever you conduct international trade? Reason is very simple, right? Understand the logic behind it. Whenever you conduct international trade, that is either you import or export. Either you import or export. The logic is that we will have to use a currency for making a payment. And for example, if I import something, then I have to use a currency for the making of the payment. That is, money has to be used for making of the payment. Now, over a period of time, there has been a lot of discussion regarding what is the best currency, what is the best suitable currency in the international market. And the reason why we use a common currency is, one, please understand, from one country to another country, the currency or the money that each of the country is using is different. For example, in India, we are using rupee. In Australia, they are using Australian dollars. In USA, they are using USA dollar. In UK, they are using pound. So from one country to another country, the currency that they are using obviously will keep on varying. Now, the question is, which currency should be used? If you ask me as an Indian, I'll of course say, let's use Indian rupee. If you ask an American, they will demand that, right, the common currency to be used should be dollars. If you ask, right, let's say an Australian, they will demand that domestic currency, that is Australian dollar, must be used. So argument is, which currency should be used then? That is the reason in the international market, one currency that has highest confidence, very, very high confidence will be used. I hope you understand. That has the highest confidence in the market will be used. And the one currency that enjoys the highest confidence in the international market is US dollars. Right? The US dollars enjoys the highest amount of confidence in the international market. In addition to this, the Federal Reserve is always ready to either supply more or supply lesser of these US dollars in the international market. That is the precise reason we use dollars in the international market. But apart from that, because there's a concern that US dollar can be weaponized, US dollar can be used to threaten other countries, to impose sanctions, etc. Now there are many other currencies which are being used in the international market. For example, in recent times, I'm pretty sure you have come across the concept of de-dollarization. What do you mean by de-dollarization? De-dollarization in a nutshell means we are trying to move away from usage of US dollars to any other currency. I hope you understand this. The idea of a de-dollarization means rather than using US dollars, we are going to use any other currency for conducting trade. For example, there is a rising trend of using Chinese yuan in the international market. There is also a rising trend of using Indian rupees for conducting trade in the international market. So argument is simple here. Why do use other currency? Any other currency in the international market? Why not Indian rupee? Argument is the one currency which has the highest confidence. The central banker should be able to provide more of these dollars, should allow the market forces to determine the value of this currency. Based on that, we will use a reserve asset, an international currency, that is dollar. But apart from that, there are many other currencies also which can be used. Question number 2, what is currency pegging system? Pegging system basically means where you are pegging. Pegging means you are basically connecting. Pegging is nothing but connecting. What is a currency pegging system? You are connecting your exchange rate to a particular currency. That is what is a pegging system. For example, let's say $1 is equal to 4 yuan plus or minus 1 yuan. Understand this, right? Let's say $1 is equal to 4 yuan plus or minus 1 yuan. This is basically called as a floating peg. What is this floating peg? This plus or minus 1 yuan will determine to what extent maximum value of a dollar will fall down or will raise up against the yuan. For example, sir, what do you mean by this? If I use a floating peg like this, the value of $1, right, at the maximum will reach 5 yuan, or value of $1 at the least will reach 3 yuan. All of you okay with this? I'll repeat it. The question is, what is this currency pegging? Currency pegging means in exchange rate, rather than allowing only the market forces to determine your exchange rate, you are deciding what is the maximum value of your currency, what is the lowest value of currency. This is called as a floating peg. And why this called as a floating peg? Right? If I decide $1 is equal to 4 yuan, imagine if I decide $1 is equal to 4 yuan, that is fixed exchange rate. I hope you understand this. That is basically a fixed exchange rate. $1 is equal to 4 yuan. But what if I decide that, okay, it will not be fixed to like 4 yuan. I will allow the yuan to fall down up to 5 yuan for every $1, and I will allow maximum yuan to appreciate up to 3 yuan per dollar. This mechanism is called as a floating peg. Right? So at the maximum, value of $1 can reach is equal to 5 yuan, or at the lowest, $1 can become is equal to 3 yuan. This is called as a pegging exchange rate mechanism. Many countries do follow this, where they will basically decide what will be their exchange rate in connection of another currency. Any doubts here? What is the difference between GVA and GDP? GVA, gross value addition. Gross value addition. GVA stands for gross value addition. GDP stands for gross domestic product. Now, what is the difference between both of them? That is a GVA and a GDP. In case of GVA, we are trying to find out how much is the overall value addition in the economy. I repeat, in GVA, how much is the overall value addition in the economy? Whereas in the context of GDP, we are trying to find out how much is the change in the market price. Change in the sense comparatively. Or as you can simply say, in case of GDP, we are trying to find out what is the market price of all the final goods and services which are produced in a particular country. In GVA, if you revise it, you will know this. In case of a GVA, gross value addition, generally the argument is we are concerned more about not intermediate goods, but how much is the overall productivity in the economy. For example, have a look at this. If I produce, let's say, using certain raw material, a product in the market. So in the process of producing this good, how much is the value that I've added in the whole economy? That is more important for me, and that is the cause, or that is basically the focus of study under gross value addition, GVA. Whereas in case of GDP, gross domestic product, we are not concerned about the value addition. We have already done the value addition. Using the value addition, right, we have used it to calculate the final market prices in the economy. And if you look at the calculation, in case of a gross value addition, we are not focused so much on product taxes as well as product subsidies. Whereas in case of GDP, we are focused more, or we are including the product taxes as well as product subsidies. That is the basic difference. And if you calculate GVA, using the GVA, I can always calculate the GDP, which is nothing but market prices at market prices. That is basically the difference between GVA as well as gross domestic product. Is this the first class of economics for batch 6? My dear, this is basically a doubt resolution session. It is not a class. I'm not taking a class for economics batch. I'm basically resolving the doubts that we asked you to mail to us. Okay. How to cover economic? Okay. In terms of nominal GDP, we stand fifth economy of the world, but in terms of real GDP, we are at the 10th position. So how can we become third by 2030? My dear, please check your data. I don't think so. We are at the 10th position in terms of real GDP. Very recently, the data has been published. We are not 10th. The whole argument is whenever government of India says we want to become the third largest, etc., etc., it is always on nominal GDP. Right? It is always on nominal GDP. Right? I repeat, whenever the government of India says we want to become the third largest economy, it is not on real GDP terms. It is always on nominal GDP terms. Okay. When will the inflation be adjusted in India and how? I do not understand when you ask me when will the inflation be adjusted. What do you mean by inflation be adjusted? Inflation is actually used to adjust for other commodities or for other calculations. For example, if you talk about nominal GDP and real GDP, what is the difference? We are using inflation to adjust. If you talk about any other indicators, we are using inflation to adjust. For example, NER versus REIT, we are using inflation to adjust. Right? So if your question is how or what is the use of inflation to adjust for these parameters? Yes, the argument is very simple here. Whenever you calculate any indicator, for example, if you talk about GDP, right? If you talk about GDP can be calculated under two heads. One is a nominal GDP and the second one is a real GDP. Right? Or for example, NER and REIT. Right? Basically, the difference is in case of NER, we are using or we are not adjusting for inflation, and REIT we are adjusting for inflation. So argument is simple. Whenever we talk about nominal, whenever we talk about the term nominal, we basically we take into consideration whatever the market prices in the current year. That is, for example, if I'm calculating, I'm pretty sure all of you have read the newspaper articles yesterday. We have calculated nominal GDP. Right? For example, GDP growth rate is this much for quarter one, the fourth highest in the last 4 quarters. I'm sorry, the highest in the last 4 quarters, etc., etc. Generally, when they talk about GDP, they will talk about nominal GDP as well as real GDP. And whenever you say nominal GDP, we are taking the market prices in that year. For example, what was the price of this product in the first quarter? That will be considered to calculate the nominal GDP. The reason why we have to take real GDP is if you take the nominal GDP, right? If you calculate GDP taking the current market prices, the price of the product would have increased because of inflation. That does not necessarily indicate improvement in the productivity. I hope you understand this. The price of the product would have increased, right? Because of inflation. But that inflation doesn't necessarily mean higher value addition is happening in the economy. Only one product would be manufactured, because of which the inflation rate would be higher, because of which the nominal GDP would be higher. That is the precise reason we use inflation to adjust to GDP by taking the historical prices or the base year prices, which is called as the real GDP. Okay. Fiscal deficit is increasing quarter by quarter. How to handle this? Right? Either you can cut down your expenditures. Simple. Right? You can cut down your expenditures. Right? So reduce your expenditure or rationalize your expenditure. Right? Or increase the tax revenues. So there are different ways to reduce the fiscal deficit. Role of MNEs in money laundering, right? It's not necessarily that the multinational enterprises are involved in money laundering, but generally there's a concept of shell companies. What is this, a shell company? Shell company, again, related to current affairs only. I'm pretty sure you're coming across all these concepts in the current affairs. Shell companies are those companies which do not have any economic activity. These do not have any kind of economic activities. That is basically reason they do not have any kind of economic activities, but they show a lot of revenues. And because showing a lot of revenues, there is always a concern. There is always a concern that these shell companies or these entities might be involved in laundering of the money. Laundering basically means conversion of black money into white money. Okay. What are Banking Regulation Acts? Banking Regulation Act of 1949 is the most important law under which all these scheduled banks are actually regulated upon. That is, how does RBI have a control over these particular banks? Right? For example, RBI will impose certain restrictions on, let's say, public sector banks. RBI will impose certain restrictions on, right, let's say, private sector banks. So, on what basis does RBI impose regulations or restrictions or let's say impose guidelines on these public sector banks or private sector banks? Because those banks are covered under the Banking Regulation Act, and because they're covered under the Banking Regulation Act, these will come under the regulation of Reserve Bank of India. That is basically the importance of Banking Regulation Act. And I can see many of you are asking a doubt here. Please understand, the object of this class was to ask you to write a mail to us. And we have announced this multiple times in the classroom in the last 1 week. Right? I don't understand why did you people not write a mail and why ask a question now? You should have written a mail. Please explain the history of rupee. What do you mean by history of rupee? I do not understand. What do you mean by history of rupee? You want to understand when rupee was minted, when was the first rupee was made, right? What is the intent behind it? If you ask me, sir, tell me the evolution of rupee, then I'll simply say it's not needed for UPSC. Right? Why? Why do you want to understand when the first coin was minted, where first note was printed, etc., etc.? Right? Rupee as a historical context, post independence, we have been using Indian rupee. Even before independence, also we had rupee, in fact. But post independence, we have kept on introducing multiple types of rupee currency notes as well as rupee currency coins, and we have discussed where the currency notes are printed, where currency notes are minted. Before 1996, a different series, right? Different types of series of the rupee was actually that is currency notes were printed. But post 1996, we have introduced the concept of the currency note, that is Gandhi series. Wholesale price index and consumer price index. Right? What is this? A wholesale price index and consumer price index. In case of a wholesale price index, a WPI and a CPI. WPI and a CPI. The wholesale price index basically talks about wholesale market. What is the wholesale market? Where from one company to another company, from one trader to another trader, from one business to one business. So whenever the wholesale market, in the wholesale market prices will vary, that measurement is called as a wholesale price index. Whereas in case of CPI, we are more focused on the retail prices. Retail prices, that is the retail market. The focus of CPI is always the retail market. That is the market where individuals will purchase the goods and services. So one is a WPI, second one is CPI. The difference is in the retail market, if the prices will change, I will measure that is CPI. In the wholesale market, prices will change, I will measure that is called as WPI. Second, in case of WPI, we do not include services. No inclusion of services. Services are not included. No inclusion of services. Whereas in case of CPI, services are included. Services are included. In case of CPI, I'm pretty sure you have revised it now. Services are included. In WPI, we are measuring the movement of changes, the movement of prices in case of 697 commodities. Whereas in case of a CPI, we are measuring the movement in prices of commodities, that is 299, right? 299 goods plus services. Goods plus services. WPI is measured for every month. It is measured for every month, and CPI is also measured every month. The base year for WPI is 2011 and 2012, and for CPI it is 2012. For WPI it is 11 and 12. For CPI it is 2012. Apart from that, CPI is published by MOSPI, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, whereas the WPI is published by Economic Advisor for Ministry of Commerce. Right. So these are certain very important differences. But basic idea is simple here. In WPI, we are measuring the movement in prices in the wholesale market, where we don't purchase. We are not purchasing the wholesale market. Companies are purchasing. Buyers, large buyers, companies, traders, they are purchasing. And that's the reason, if you remember the discussion I said, if there's a continuous WPI, if there is a continuous, unsustained, very, very high rate of WPI over a period of time, it will have an impact and even the CPI will start increasing. That is the whole argument between WPI as well as CPI. Okay. The difference between GDP, GNP, and NDP. And is there a need to remember the reports of WTO, WEF, right, etc.? My argument is, what is the name of the report? Please do remember. Right, what is the name of the report? So please do remember which authority publishes which report. Important. UPSC has asked earlier also these kind of questions. Please by heart it. Then what is the basic difference between GDP, GNP, and NDP? If you compare GDP and NDP, if you make a comparison between GDP and NDP, what is the basic idea? NDP we can derive it using gross domestic product minus depreciation. The formula is simple. NDP you can derive by using GDP, that is NDP is equal to GDP minus depreciation. Now what is the basic idea for depreciation? Depreciation represents how much expenditure you will incur to replace existing capital machinery. I'll repeat the statement. What is depreciation? How much money are you spending to replace existing capital machinery? Now your question will be, sir, why do we need to replace existing capital machinery? The reason behind it is, imagine today you will start a manufacturing facility and right, you will purchase a machine today. Over a period of time, the machine will undergo a lot of maintenance, lot of wear and tear, lot of repairs, etc. Is it okay if I say after 10 years, you'll replace this machine, or after 7 years, you'll replace this machine, etc.? So over a period of time, because the machine becomes old, the machine becomes outdated, there is no option available to you. You'll have to replace the capital which is already existing. And that expenditure that you incur to replace existing capital, it is called as a depreciation. It is referred as a depreciation. Now the difference, or why do we use GDP and why do we calculate NDP, is very simple here. Imagine I've produced 100 rupee worth of final goods and services this year. Right? I hope you understand this. Imagine I've produced 100 rupee worth of goods and services this year, that is GDP is 100 rupee. Now, will you be able to find out whether all of these final goods and services, is it going to add to the existing machinery or is it going to replace existing machinery? I hope you understand this. If I produce, let's say, 100 rupee worth of goods and services, can you definitively say whether this 100 rupee worth of goods and services, assuming these are machines, is it only to replace existing capital or is it addition to the existing capital? And what is the importance? If it is addition to the existing capital, it simply means whatever is the machinery present, whatever is the capital goods present in the economy, we are adding more capital goods. And if you add more capital goods, don't you think the production in the economy will increase? Whereas if all of these, right, let's say 100 rupee worth of capital goods are used to replace existing machinery, does it mean overall production in the coming days will increase compared to the first example? No. That is the reason what we do is we find out how much of these final goods and services are used for replacing existing machinery. And that is basically the idea of depreciation. And that's the reason I said if the gap between NDP and GDP is widening, it doesn't necessarily mean productivity is going to increase in the economy. Right? It might more mean there is a stability. Let's say rather than stability, there's a stagnancy in the economy because the production might not increase because you're replacing machine, you're not adding a machine to the economy. Whereas if the gap between NDP and GDP becomes very narrow in the sense that the gap is absolutely, let's say, zero. Zero means what? There is no machinery, or let's say there is no final goods and service which has been produced in this year. None of it is being used for replacement. All of it is added to the existing capital, which means more production, more productivity in the economy. That is the reason why do we calculate GDP as well as right NDP. Then the question is, what is the difference between GDP and GNP? If you remember, the formula is very simple. GNP is equal to GDP plus net factor income from abroad. NFIA, net factor income from abroad. The argument why do we calculate GNP is very simple here. In case of GDP, we are calculating what is the final goods and services produced by all the companies, all the individuals who are present in India. All those who are present in India, how much is the final goods and services which is being produced by them? Not necessarily the nationals of India. For example, I'm residing in India. I'm producing goods and services, right? That will contribute to higher GDP. A foreigner is producing in India, right? Their contribution will also be counted in the form of GDP. But don't you think, when you calculate GDP, I'll take an extreme example so that you understand very quickly. What if all the GDP contribution, that is, let's say, factor incomes such as salaries, profits, etc., all of it is produced by foreigners? Again, extreme examples. I know it is not going to happen, but imagine if all the factor incomes in India are produced by foreigners, no doubt your GDP will be there. Your GDP will be 3.2 trillion, 3.5 trillion, whatever the number is. But does it indicate how much is the earnings of Indian nationals? Does it give you any data regarding how much Indian companies have earned profits? Does it give you data regarding how much is the salaries earned by Indian nationals? That information will not be provided because GDP does not talk about it. GDP simply says how much is the market price of all the final goods and services which are produced. So there is a problem in GDP. GDP does not tell you how much is the income generated by Indian residents, Indian nationals. That information will never be provided. That is the precise reason. What we do is using GDP, we calculate a GNP, gross national product. We calculate gross national product so that we'll be able to find out of this particular GDP, if GDP is $3.5 trillion, out of that, how much is earned by Indian residents? How much is earned by Indian nationals? That information that you can derive in only calculating the GNP. And that is the reason we take GDP. From GDP, we subtract. Simple idea. From GDP, we subtract how much is national income contribution done by foreign citizens, how much is done by foreign companies, etc., etc. We subtract it and we add how much is the factor incomes earned by Indian nationals which are residing outside India, which are not there in India but are earning outside India. So add that, subtract foreign incomes, you will get gross national product. Okay. Okay. What is banking system? If in a doubt session, if you ask me, explain banking system, that we have discussed for 4 classes, right? So I hope you understand. We discussed banking system for 4 classes, and your question is what is banking system? All I can tell you is banking system basically represents the type of banking institutions which are present in India. For example, if you remember, the banking system represents, right, at the top of the banking system, we have Reserve Bank of India, and below Reserve Bank of India, we have scheduled banks, right? Scheduled banks as well as non-scheduled banks, or else they will say first commercial banks. Commercial banks. What do you mean by commercial bank? I hope you remember the definition. Commercial bank basically means those banks which are involved in a collection of deposits and giving of loans. Collection of deposits and issuing loans. These are called as commercial banks as per Banking Regulation Act of 1949. And these commercial banks are further divided into two parts. One is basically scheduled commercial bank, and the second one is non-scheduled commercial banks. And I've given you a list of 10 non-scheduled commercial banks, so do not by heart it. It's of no use for you. The basic argument is scheduled commercial banks are those banks which are scheduled, right, which are registered under Schedule 2 of RBI Act of 1934. And because these are scheduled, these can always approach Reserve Bank of India, use various policies of Reserve Bank of India, and borrow from Reserve Bank of India, etc. Whereas non-scheduled commercial banks, these are not given these kind of facilities. That's a basic difference between a scheduled and non-scheduled. And within scheduled commercial banks, we have public sector banks, we have private sector banks, we have regional rural banks, RRBs, regional rural banks. We have the payment banks now. We have small finance banks, and we also have many of these cooperative banks which are scheduled. Cooperative banks which are scheduled. Okay, this is basically the banking structure. This is basically the banking structure. Okay. Fiscal policy. What do you mean by fiscal policy? Fiscal policy basically represents the taxation policy or the taxation as well as expenditure incurred by the government. Any policy that deals with the taxation or the expenditure of government of India is referred to as fiscal policy. It is referred to as fiscal policy. Now, for example, if government of India will announce certain policies where more taxes are imposed, where tax rates are changed, where a new type of a taxation system is introduced, or let's say expenditure, where government of India will announce more subsidies for fertilizers, where government will announce more expenditure on infrastructure. So whenever government announces any type of a policy that is connected to taxation and expenditure, that is collectively referred as a fiscal policy. Okay. Discuss 5-year planning. Very good. How do you discuss 5-year plans? How do you discuss 5-year plans? If you have a doubt in 5-year plan, you can ask me the doubt. Don't ask me, sir, discuss taxation. We discuss taxation for 12 hours. You're asking me to discuss taxation in a doubt session of 3.5 hours. Right? So please be very, very specific in case of whatever doubts you people have. What is depreciation? Right? Depreciation simply means, understand this. Let's say there is one currency, that is a dollar, and against that we are making a comparison of rupee. Okay, $1 rupee. Now let's say hypothetically today $1 is equal to 80 rupee. Right? $1 is equal to 80 rupee. Now, because of two situations. One, because of market forces. What do you mean by market forces? There is a higher demand or a higher supply of a domestic currency against a foreign currency, or because of government policy, because the government will fix the exchange rate. In both of these situations, again, there is a mix and match, right? A market determined for floating peg, etc., etc. So, because of the market forces or because the government will fix the exchange rate, the value of a domestic currency against a foreign currency can keep on changing. For example, let's say only if you are following a market force approach, that is only the demand and supply of the currency is going to determine the value of currency, then we use two terms. One is called as appreciation, second one is depreciation. One is appreciation, second one is depreciation. What's the basic idea of appreciation or depreciation? If there is a higher supply or a demand for one currency against one more currency, obviously value will keep on changing. For example, imagine there is very high supply of domestic currency, that is supply of a rupee increases. And if supply of rupee is increasing, the argument is very simple because the demand for dollar is increasing. So now, how do you say that supply of rupee can increase? For example, what if foreign investors will start withdrawing their investments from here? Right? I'm pretty sure you're reading newspapers, you're coming across all of these in the newspapers. If the foreign investors are basically selling dollars in the market and they're selling rupees in the market and they're withdrawing dollars out of India, it simply means the supply of domestic currency, that is rupee, is increasing and demand for the dollar is increasing. Demand for the dollar is increasing, supply of rupee is increasing. So whenever supply of rupee increases, the rupee should start losing the value, and this we simply call it as depreciation of rupee. This will simply refer to this as a depreciation of rupee. Why? Rupee value is decreasing against the dollar, and supply increases, value should come down. Basics of economics. Right? So if rupee supply increases, the value of rupee will start falling down. That is called as the depreciation of rupee. On the other side, let's say, imagine another situation where foreign investment is coming into India. Huge amount of investment will flow into India, which means now they want to sell the dollar. They want to supply the dollar, sell the dollar, and they want to purchase rupees. They want to purchase rupees. They want to sell dollars and they want to purchase rupees from the market, which means the supply of dollar increases. The value of the dollar should keep on falling. Makes perfect sense. If supply of dollar increases, value of dollar should keep on decreasing. And if rupees demand increases, the value of the rupee should keep on increasing. And whenever this happens, because of supply and demand forces, we use the term appreciation and depreciation. And when value of rupee is increasing, because there's a higher demand for the rupee, we'll simply say rupee is appreciating here. And when there's a higher supply of dollars and the value of the dollar is coming down, we'll say dollar is depreciating. So the depreciation term can be used in the context of a foreign currency as well as a domestic currency. But only argument is whenever it is because of supply and demand, we use appreciation, depreciation. And whenever it is because of the market forces, whenever it is because of the government will decide the exchange rate, we use the term devaluation and revaluation. Okay. General questions now. How to revise completed subject during another subject class? If you remember, I told you a simple trick. Okay. I told you that whenever you think of revising any subject, again I'll speak about economics. I told you that try to make short notes. In fact, I've given you certain examples of mind maps. I told you prepare mind maps, and on weekly basis, or again, please understand there is no universal answer to these kind of questions. I cannot simply say once every 5 days you'll have to revise. What if you can recollect the things with a longer memory? You know what is your memory power. So based on your memory power, you decide whether it should be once in 15 days, once in a month, you decide it. My trick that I generally follow, which I would strongly advise you to follow, advice, not a compulsion, it's an advice, is that try to make mind maps, and once every 15 days, have one day only for revision. For example, Saturday. If you're attending weekday classes, Saturday you'll be free. So use that particular one day, right, or let's say half a day to revise the earlier subject. And keep that revision, keep the constant revision. Let's say this week I will revise economics, next week I'll revise the polity, a week after that I will revise, let's say, ecology and environment. This would be my recommendation to all of you. Now, whether you follow this or not, it is entirely left to you, right? Because there is no universal way. There is not just a formula. There is no one formula that you can remember. Everyone has their own, right? Let's say a way to revise the things. So what I would recommend is once every 15 days, keep your mind maps ready, update your current affairs, and after 15 days is over, or after 7 days, after 30 days, entirely dependent upon you. Please revise according to that. Okay. How to make notes from live class? My recommendation is do not make notes. My recommendation again, do not make notes during the live class. Why? If you are trying to make notes for 3.5 hours continuously, it is not going to be done. Second point, if you keep on writing, it simply means you're not listening correctly. So my recommendation is listen to the lecture first. Listen to the lecture. That should be your priority. Listen carefully to the lecture. And after that, when you're revising, when you're reading a book, when you're reading additional reading material, right, based on that, you make notes. So my recommendation to you people is don't make notes while you're listening. You will not be able to do that. You will not be able to do that because I do understand, right? I do understand for 3.5 hours, you cannot keep on writing continuously. That's not going to happen, right? So listen first, then make notes. Okay. For current affairs, what resources should I prefer from the following? Hindu analysis, comprehensive news analysis, webinars, and monthly magazine. Please understand, we have different products. We have CNA, we have DNA, we have webinars, we have magazine. It's not that you will have to listen to every bit of information that is given to you under all the four. Why? If you're going to cover current affairs, definitely yes, there is going to be an overlap between what is given in a CNA and what is there in the magazine. Very, very simple. Because what is a monthly magazine? It is a compilation of the current affairs which has happened in the last 1 month. So if what has appeared in the CNA, there's going to be an overlap, right, in the monthly magazine. So if you're a kind of a student who says, sir, once in a month I want to sit for 2 days, 3 days, I want to complete the magazine, use the magazine. If you're a kind of student who says, no sir, right, month-wise I can't do, right, I feel tensed. My concern is I should be taking care of current affairs on day-to-day basis, then use a CNA. Sir, should I attend both webinars as well as Hindu newspaper analysis? If you have sufficient time, if you feel I should have more coverage, then attend both. If you say simply, no sir, I can't attend both, one is sufficient for me, then you pick and choose a webinar or a Hindu news analysis. So I hope you understand. It's not that you will have to read everything. It's not that you'll have to read or attend everything. The argument is based on your convenience, based on your preference, based on what works for you. You use that. Right? We are offering you all the products. Use the product which gives you more returns. You decide that. Okay. Suggest any book where each and every concept is covered comprehensively. There are two tricky parts to this question. Where each and every concept, one, and second one is comprehensively. I can give you the resources. For example, I can simply say, ask you to read, right, the notes which are provided by Chartered Accountants Association. There is one authority in case of India, ICAI. But should you read it? Question is, should you read it? Answer is no. I can simply ask you to go to NIOS, right, open source, National Institute, NIOS, and economics books are there. I can ask you to download it. But should you download and read it? No. So please understand, you are under the impression that there is one book, golden book. If you read that book, economics will become very easy for you. There is no such book. I hope you understand the point. You are under the impression that there is only one book, right? The faculty does not tell me that book because the faculty wants to keep it secret. Absolutely no. There is no single resource that will discuss everything for you and that too comprehensively. I can tell you with guarantee you will not get such book. There is no golden pill here. Then what is the outcome? Then what is the way forward? I would simply say, I've told you this again and again in the classroom, even today I'll repeat the same thing. Whatever book you have, use that. Do not purchase 10 books for Indian economy. It is of no use for you for GS paper 3. Trust me on it. One book is more than sufficient. Right? Use that book. Whatever we have discussed in the classroom, read it, and I'm pretty sure you will not get all the things that I've discussed in the classroom in the book. Why? I'll give a very simple example. We have discussed a concept called as e-rupee. We have discussed a concept called as e-rupee. That is not given in the book. I know for a fact it is not given in any of the books. Why? It is from current affairs. We have discussed the foreign trade policy 2023. No book has covered because it was announced in the last 6 months. So argument is very simple here. Do not keep running behind the books. Use only one book. That should be more than sufficient for you. I repeat, that should be more than sufficient. You can read about GDP in 10 books. What is the difference in GDP discussed in book X compared to GDP discussed in book Y? There will be no difference. Same things every book will discuss. So that is the reason. That's the reason. Do not run behind books. Use any book that you have. Any book. Sir, I have a right by this author. Use it. Sir, I have a book by this author. Use it. One book is more than sufficient. And I'm pretty sure. By now many of you would have listened to some of the toppers that have said, I read IGNO notes. I read Chartered Accountant notes. I read right NIOS notes. My dear, those are very, very bulky notes. For GS paper 3, for let's say a student from a different background, those resources are of no consequence. Those resources are not of any use to you. So that is the precise reason. That's the precise reason. Do not run behind books. Use only one book. Any book that you have. Use that. And then keep on consolidating. Keep on consolidating using current affairs. That would be my strong advice to you. Okay. How to cover and link current affairs with basic chapters of economics. Okay, this is my advice. 1, read a static portion. Be fundamentally very strong. Fundamentals should be very, very strong. And when I say fundamentals should be very strong, do not try to understand every concept in economics. It is not required. It is not at all required. All the fundamentals of economics you don't require. For example, we discussed concept of law of demand and law of supply. Correct? We discussed the idea of law of demand and law of supply. So when did we discuss? First class. Any batch that I take up, first class I discuss law of demand and law of supply. What we discussed was the basics of law of demand and law of supply. What is law of demand? Why there's a change in the demand? If there's a change in the demand, right, what will happen? What do we call it? How the law of demand is represented in the graphical representation, etc. That is more than sufficient for GS paper. Now, is it only the law of demand? What we have discussed, is it the only point regarding law of demand? Is it the only concept related to law of demand? Absolutely no. People have done thesis on law of demand. So I hope you understand. Do not get into the details of law of demand. Do not take up optional paper and start reading everything about law of demand and law of supply. A lot of concepts are there regarding law of demand and law of supply. But question is it required for GS paper 3? If you're writing optional paper, I would simply say, then read. Be fundamentally very strong regarding everything on law of demand and law of supply. But is it needed for GS paper 3? Absolutely not required. That's the reason. Always remember this. Based on the requirement, you study. For example, we discussed RBI. We spent around 4.5 hours only on Reserve Bank of India. But is it the only thing about RBI? Of course no. There are so many things about RBI which are not needed for UPSC, which we did not discuss in the classroom. So that's the reason. I hope you understand. I hope you understand my point here. Be fundamentally very strong. Then, sir, what do you mean by fundamentally very strong? Whatever concepts we have discussed, understand those concepts. Do not try to read everything about these concepts. Then I'm pretty sure you will read for 4 years, 5 years. Economics will not get over for you. Right? Do not complicate it to that extent. Be fundamentally very strong. Then whatever comes in the current affairs, I would simply say, right, connect it. Make notes, connect it with the static portion. So whenever you revise, you are not only revising static, you are also revising current affairs. Okay. Okay, done. Now, how to control inflation, right? How to control inflation. But here, there are different ways to control inflation. There are different ways. For example, in recent times, if you have read the newspaper, can I say you can control inflation by imposing export restrictions? One, you can control inflation by having export restriction. You can control inflation by imposing export duties. And when I'm talking here, I'm talking about quota restriction. Don't say both one and two are same. Right? One way you can control inflation by imposing export quota restriction, export duties. Right? Third way is by importing more and more. By importing whatever is causing the inflation, import more and more. Fourth one, reduce money supply. Reduce money supply. Fifth one, impose right, storage or warehousing restrictions. Etc. So please let me know. Have you come across all of these measures which are taken by the government of India in recent times or no? Anything that I've written on the board, right? 5 things that I've written on the board, anything that I've written has not been there in the current affairs. If anybody says, sir, nothing has been there in the current affairs, let me know. I'll tell you the context also. In the context of rice, wheat, fertilizers, etc. I don't think government of India used all these policies now. Right? They've imposed the quota restrictions on exports. Some of the exports they've blocked now. They're not even allowing export of some of these commodities. Right? They're importing more and more of these commodities by entering into agreements with other countries. Right? We are reducing money supply. Reserve Bank of India has increased the repo rate in the last 1 year. Right? A lot of imposing restrictions over warehousing or let's say storage also have been imposed by government of India. So I hope you understand. There are a lot of ways through which you can control inflation. These are some of them. There are a lot of ways through which you can control inflation, and these are some of them. Okay. Okay. So can I skip the book and rely on your notes? Right? My recommendation is refer to one book. Right? Refer to one book only, more than sufficient. Right? Whatever you're reading in my PPT, if it is there in the book, please refer to one book. That should be more than sufficient. Okay. What is a DTA? DTA stands for Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement. Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement. DTA, Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement. Now, what is this Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement? For example, let's say there is an investor in USA. Investor is from USA. The investor will make an investment in India. Investor will invest in India. Now, whatever is the income generated from this investment, now the question is, should they impose the tax in both the countries on this income? Because the investor comes from USA, government of USA will impose the tax. Because the income has been generated in India, government of India will impose the tax. If on the same tax base, I repeat, if on the same tax base, two governments, right, that is USA as well as India, will impose the tax, this is called as a double taxation. This is called as a double taxation. And whenever there is double taxation, it will affect investment. It will automatically affect a lot of investments. For example, if you are the foreign investor and if government of USA as well as India impose the tax on the same income, don't you think, right, you will be afraid to make investments in India because there's so much of taxes you'll have to pay in both the countries. So it will definitely have an impact on the investments made. That is the precise reason why the countries will sign the agreements. I repeat, that's why countries will sign the agreement, and this agreement is called as Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement. Under Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement, the tax rights or the powers to impose the taxes will be distributed between both the countries. One country will choose to impose taxes on certain investments like this. Another country will have the right to impose taxes on the remaining investments. Such agreements are called as Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement. And the importance of Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement is basically that this will give more clarity for investment purposes. Right, so investments will be promoted, more clarity will be there, both the countries will get the benefit, both the countries under certain circumstances will be allowed to impose taxes and collect tax revenues. That is the advantage of a Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement. Okay. What is the law of supply and its movement? Okay. Law of supply simply says if nothing else changes in the market, if everything else remains unchanged, ceteris paribus, if everything else remains unchanged, then the price of the commodity changes, then automatically the supply will also change in the same direction. I'll repeat it. If nothing else changes in the market, then the price of the commodity changes, then the supply will change in the same direction. That is, if the price of the product goes up, supply will also go up. If the price of the product goes down, supply will also go down. So why does it happen? If you remember, there are various factors that will influence supply in the market. Price of the product, price of the related goods, the taxes, the subsidies, etc., etc. But whenever you say the price of the product goes up, if you are the supplier, if the price of the product goes up, nothing else is changing. No factor, right? Nothing else is changing. No factor, the other factor is changing. Only the price of the product is changing, which means there is a shortage of supply in the market. You can earn more revenue now. You can earn more profit by supplying more in the market. So because you're able to earn, right? Because you're able to earn more and more profits now, you'll be able to supply more and more, or you'll supply more in order to earn more profit. And when the prices of the products will fall down in the market, and naturally prices of the products will fall down in the market, that also generally means the supply is too much in the economy, which means your earnings are becoming lower now. And when your earnings will become lower, rather than supplying more and more, you'll reduce your supply. That is basically law of supply. Okay. Why 81 bond considered to absorb losses? My dear, both 81 bond and a tier 2 bonds. There is no 82 bond. Please understand. That's the reason I say, please be very careful whenever you ask, whenever you read these things. In the PPT you can check, even in the classroom you can check. I've never written additional tier 2 bond. No, I've never written additional tier 2 bonds. I've simply written tier 2 bonds. So additional tier 1 bonds can absorb losses much more easily compared to tier 2 bonds, because please understand, in the provisions regarding 81 bonds, if the capital adequacy ratio falls below a certain level, generally around 6.125%. So when the additional tier 1 bonds have been issued, there is a provision, there's a clause in the bond. If the capital adequacy ratio falls below 6.125%, then the banks can simply write off additional tier 1 bonds. Whereas tier 2 bonds can be written off much more later, right? After much more, right, a decline in the capital adequacy ratio. So because additional tier 1 bonds can be used to absorb the losses much more easily, can be used much more right, earlier compared to tier 2 bonds. So that's the reason we say additional tier 1 bonds can absorb losses or is much more reliable compared to tier 2 bonds. Okay. What are instruments of credit control? Instruments of credit control is nothing but monetary policy tools. These are nothing but monetary policy tools. Monetary policy tools. For example, we have two sets of monetary policy tools. Right, that is instruments for credit control. One is right, let's say quantitative set of tools, quantitative or general methods, quantitative set of tools, and the second one is qualitative set of tools. Qualitative set of tools, quantitative and qualitative set of tools. In case of quantitative, we have repo, reverse repo, like CRR, SLR, OMO, right now standing deposit facility, etc. Where basically these tools are used to either absorb the liquidity from the market or reduce the money supply in the market or increase the money supply in the market. Whereas in case of qualitative set of tools, we have tools such as rationing of credit, variation of margin requirements, etc., etc. These kind of tools can be used. These kind of tools can be used to either increase or decrease money supply, but targeting specific sectors. I hope you remember, for example, let's say PSL, priority sector lending. Under priority sector lending, can we increase the money supply only in the agriculture loans segment? Yes. Can we increase the money supply only for housing segment? Yes. Can we increase the loans or reduce the loans? In fact, the other side also is very much applicable. Increase or decrease the loans which are given to MSME sector? Of course, answer is yes. So quantitative, qualitative, these are the set of tools, credit control measures, using which you can either increase or decrease the money supply. But in case of quantitative, you cannot target a specific sector, whereas in case of qualitative, you can always target a specific sector. That's the basic difference between a quantitative and qualitative. What do you mean by gig economy? Gig economy basically means that part of the economy where there is no traditional relationship between an employer and employee. What do you mean by traditional relationship? For example, right, tomorrow you become an employee of Government of India. That is, let's say you become an IS officer. Once you become an IS officer, before becoming an IS officer, you will have to sign a contract with the government. You will have to sign an agreement with the government, where Government of India simply tells you what is your role, what is your responsibility, how much will be your salary, how much of this will be, right, let's say the HRA, how much will be, right, this breakup component, etc. How many days in a week you're supposed to work, etc. All these will be put in a document. That is the traditional employer-employee relationship. Whereas in case of gig economy, right, the basic idea for gig economy is that there is no this kind of a traditional relation. This kind of traditional relationship does not exist, where the arrangements are done, work arrangements are done, and if work is done, only then certain payment for the work done is paid. For example, if I'm a driver, if I'm a, let's say, delivery partner in Swiggy, the arrangement that exists between Swiggy, the company, and me is that for a delivery that I do, for every delivery, food delivery that I do, certain money will be paid to me. That is a kind of a worker and employee relationship that exists between me and Swiggy. And this is not a traditional relationship. In a traditional relationship, right, there is a scope of growth. Right, the company will provide you skilling initiatives. They will provide a lot of skills because they want to get more productivity from you. They will give you paid holidays, maternity holidays are there, paternity holidays are there. These kind of features are not available in case of a gig economy. So that is basically the idea of a gig economy. Okay. So is a TN Economic Class 12 book better than NCERT Class 12? If you want to use a TN Class 12 book, you can use it. Right, a Tamil Nadu board, there are two books, right, Class 11 and Class 12. But here is a very important point that you should note. Compared to NCERT books, the Tamil Nadu books are much more bulkier. I'll repeat the statement here. Much more bulky. Bulky means the number of pages, the size of the book. Tamil Nadu books are very, very large compared to NCERT books. If you say, sir, I have sufficient time, I will read Tamil Nadu board book, then I would simply recommend, yes, you can use those books as well. But again, don't read NCERT, then start reading Tamil Nadu board. You are basically repeating. Okay. So I'm not getting about statement regarding trade deficit. It is in news that how the India and China trade deficit exceeds $100 billion in a financial year. Of course, it is more than $100 billion. Right? How can the trade deficit be higher than $100 billion? It can be higher. Please understand this. Right? I'll give a very simple example. Imagine you'll export to China worth let's say $30 billion. In one financial year, you'll export $30 billion worth of goods and services to China. Whereas you'll import, right, let's say more than $200 billion worth of goods and services from China. Now, please tell me, if you look at the situation, right, don't you think the value of imports, which is much higher than export, it is a trade deficit? And in this example, the trade deficit is worth $170 billion. So of course, yes, is India's trade deficit with China more than $100 billion? Yes, which means the value of imports that we do from China is much, much higher compared to value of exports I do to China. So that's a fact, by the way, and that is the precise reason. That is the precise reason why government of India is very apprehensive about entering into trade agreements where China is already the member. Right, I'll give an example. India is not a member. India is not a member of RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. One of the reasons why India stayed away from RCEP is because China is already a part and participant of RCEP. We do not want to enter into a trade agreement where China is already present. In that case, if trade agreement is signed, China will get more market access. Its trade deficit with India will further increase. Okay. What is market equilibrium? Market equilibrium is a situation wherein whatever is being supplied in the economy, the same is being demanded in the economy. For example, if I represent, let's say, law of demand like this and law of supply like this, usually a downward sloping and upward sloping curve, the point of intersection is basically called as a market equilibrium. And what is this market equilibrium? It basically represents a situation in the economy where whatever is the demand or whatever is the supply, let's say this is 100 units, whatever is the supply, same quantity is being demanded in the economy. That is called as a market equilibrium situation. But I told you, many of the times, right, because of various factors, there could be a mismatch between supply and the demand. And as a result of this, at one position, there could be higher supply compared to demand. Because of various factors in the economy, there could be higher supply compared to demand, and this is called as a surplus situation. Demand is worth, let's say, right, 50 units. Supply is of 200 units. This is called a surplus. Market prices will start falling down. And there could be another situation where, right, the demand is for 220 units, but the supply is only for 30 units, which means there is a shortage situation in the market. And whenever there's a shortage situation, the market prices automatically will start increasing in the economy. And this is basically the idea for market equilibrium. EPUI benefits. What do you mean by EPUI? I don't understand. Difference between elasticity and inelasticity. Elasticity and inelasticity is a very common term. In what context are you asking? Elastic means the flexibility. There is a lot of movement that can be observed. For example, if I say the demand is elastic for a product, right? The demand is either elastic or inelastic. We'll use generally this. Okay, demand is elastic or inelastic. If I say for a product, demand is very much elastic. Demand is elastic. What do you mean by this? Even if there is a small change in the price, the demand for the product will change by a very large margin. And understand my statement? I'll repeat it again. If I say demand is elastic for a product, it simply means if there is a small change in the price, then the change in the demand will be much larger. For example, luxury products, not high-end luxury products, generally luxury products. So for general luxury products, we say demand is elastic because please understand, many people in Indian economy, middle income households, even higher income households purchase a lot of luxuries, not high-end luxury, lot of luxury. For example, a perfume is a luxury product. I hope you understand. Perfume is a luxury product. So a lot of houses in India purchase luxury products, but their consumption of these luxury products is not very high. They do not consume these products in a high quantity. That is the reason whenever the prices of these products will change marginally, the demand will change by a large margin. We say demand is very much elastic. On the other side, demand is inelastic. What is the meaning of it? Prices might change. Demand will not change by much. For example, let's say petrol and diesel, or for that matter, electricity. Right? For that matter, electricity, or for that matter, best example, salt. So the price of the salt, let's say, will fall down by 2 rupee. Do you think you'll consume more and more salt? Right? Apply common sense. If prices of salt will increase by 10 rupee, will you reduce your consumption of the salt? No. So argument is simple here. Inelastic demand. Again, I'm talking about demand here. The term elastic, inelastic is used in the context. Use the context. If I say inelastic demand, I simply mean that prices might change, demand will not change by much. Whereas if I say elastic demand, the prices, even if there's a small variation in the prices, the demand will change by a large margin in the economy. Okay. Moody raises India's growth at 6.7% from 5%. But per government data, our growth rate is 7%. Why this difference? Because the data sets are different. The way they measure is different. Right? So every authority will have their own measurements, will have their own estimate. And that is the precise reason. Estimates will change from one authority to another authority. Government of India will give you one more estimate. Right? RBI will give you one more estimate. Right? Economists will give you one more estimate. Because please understand, everybody's understanding of the economy varies slightly from each other. And because their basic argument is that I think because of this, right, it is going to change. Somebody will simply say, no, impact of Russia-Ukraine war will not be very high. So I think India's GDP will grow by this much. So from one authority to another authority, from one entity to another entity, how they measure, how they look at economy will change. And that's the reason estimates will also change. Okay. Difference between tax elasticity and tax buoyancy. Tax elasticity measures, right? Understand this. Tax elasticity measures if there is a change in the tax rate, how much is the changes in the taxes collected? I'll repeat it. Tax elasticity measures if there is a change in the tax rate, you change the tax rate, how much is the changes in the taxes collected? Whereas the tax buoyancy means if there is a change in the GDP, as a result of the change in the GDP, how much is the change in the taxes collected? Right? I hope you understand. If there's a change in the GDP, for example, imagine your tax rate is 10%. Understand this carefully now. Imagine your tax rate is 10%. Right now GDP is 100 rupee, which means you'll be collecting 10 rupee tax. If your GDP increases to 200 rupee, your taxes collected will also increase. So without changing the tax rate, how much is the changes in the taxes collected because of change in the GDP is called as a tax buoyancy. Whereas the tax elasticity means, imagine the GDP is 100, you will increase your tax rate from 10% to 12%. So because of the change in the tax rate, how much is the change in the taxes collected? That is called as tax elasticity. Okay. EUPI benefits. What is this EUPI? Where have I discussed EUPI? I have not discussed anything in the context of EUPI. Please check. What are Giffen goods and Veblen goods? Giffen goods and Veblen goods. Giffen goods and Veblen goods both do not follow law of demand. What does the law of demand state? Law of demand says that whenever other factors will remain unchanged, if the price of the product changes, demand will also change. And if you remember correctly, I told you, right, in case of a law of demand, the price and demand are inversely related. Right? These are inversely related. Right? That is, if the price goes up, demand goes down, and if the price goes down, demand goes up. But in case of the Giffen good and Veblen good, you generally do not find these kind of relationship. What happens in Giffen and Veblen good? The price and the demand will move in same direction, not in opposite direction, in the same direction. For example, Giffen goods. If you remember, I told you example of a Giffen good. Very, very inferior product. Very, very inferior goods. In case of Giffen goods, these are very, very inferior goods. That is, let's say price of rice which is the least quality rice, inferior good. That's very important. Rice which is the least quality rice. Let's say price of the rice goes up. But when the price of the rice goes up, a household does not have sufficient amount of money to substitute. I hope you understand. Does not have sufficient money to substitute this rice with another rice because this is the least quality rice. So income limitation is there. Substitution cannot be done. They will reduce the consumption of something else, but they will consume more rice now because this is the most inferior product. There is no alternative. They will demand more of this inferior quality product. So price is going up. With that, demand is also going up. Right. So that is the reason I said inferior goods, which are consumed by very, very poor houses. Very, very poor houses. Right. These are called as Giffen goods. On the other side, Veblen goods. These are consumed by very rich people. These are termed snobs. SNOB, snobs. These are consumed by very, very rich people. Ultra rich, very wealthy people. And in case of Veblen goods, whenever the price of the goods will start increasing, these very rich people, ultra wealthy people, they want to use these products as status symbols. For example, Lamborghini car, right? Let's say Rolls-Royce car, right? Very high quality diamonds, and these are status symbols for them. And that is the precise reason they will purchase more and more because these are very costly. Others will not be able to purchase them. Snobs means these are very rich people who will purchase certain products because nobody else in the market can purchase it. I hope you understand this. Why this is called as a snob? Snobs basically means these are ultra rich people. They will purchase certain goods only because others cannot afford them. They want to purchase it to showcase to the economy that they are very, very rich. Nobody can match them. Right? That is the basic idea between Giffen and Veblen goods. Okay. So in NCERT, not all topics are mentioned. So Byju's book is sufficient for economics. I've told you this again and again. Same question. Use one reference book, and if your fundamentals are weak, use NCERT. Start with NCERT. Use one reference book. Okay. What is the difference between basic price and factor cost? Right. Again, understand this. You use the factor cost. To arrive at the basic prices. Right, sir. What do you mean by basic price? imagine you sell this product in the market. You sell this product in the market. What will you get? You will get market price. All of you okay with this? If you sell this product in the market, what will you get? You will get market price. But out of this market price, you have received a certain product subsidies. Correct? You have received certain product subsidies, and you also have collected certain product tax. You'll have to adjust for the product subsidy as well as the product tax will give you basic price. I'll repeat it again. Please look at the formula. Right? Please open the PPT and look at the formula. I've given the same formula. When you sell a product in the market, you will get market price. But in that market price, there is certain product tax that you have collected. You will give it to government, and there's also certain product subsidy, right, which has been used to arrive at a market price. So adjust for the product subsidy as well as the product tax, you will get basic prices. Whereas factor cost basically is the sum total of all the factor expenditures or all the expenditures that have incurred on the factor cost. For example, you will incur expenditure in the form of wages, you'll incur expenditure in the form of right, let's say raw material, you'll incur expenditure in the form of rent, etc. So on all the four factors of production, whatever expenditure you've incurred, include that, you'll get factor cost. Okay. If I write 1 year old data in exam, will it affect my score too much? My recommendation is yes, do not use the old data. Do not use old data. Use right, let's say data from that year's economic survey or that year's budget documents. That would be my recommendation to you. If you're writing, let's say exams, let's say you're writing mains exam in 2024. You're writing a mains exam in 2024. So in the year 2024, government would have announced a budget. Certain data will be available to you. Government would also have brought economic survey. Certain data will be available to you. Try to use that data if no recent data is available to you. Okay. So factor cost is equal to basic prices. Who said that? Did I say that? Did I say that? My dear, open the PPT. No. Open the PPT. If you do not have PPT, then download the PPT. Open the PPT. I said a factor cost will be used to calculate basic prices. Did I say factor cost is equal to basic prices? How, my dear? You're not even looking at PPTs now. So factor cost will be used, right? We will use the factor cost. We will adjust for production tax. We will adjust for production tax and production subsidies to arrive at basic prices. Right? Go through the PPT. We will use the production taxes as well as production subsidies. We will use that, adjust the factor cost to reach basic prices. Right? There's a difference between both of them. Okay. What is public distribution system? Public distribution system refers to right certain infrastructure that has been created by the government, using which government will distribute food grains to the people. I'll repeat it. Public distribution system basically refers to network. Network is nothing but infrastructure that has been created by the government, using which government will distribute food grains to the beneficiaries. For example, we have right fair price shops. You remember this? We have fair price shops. How the public distribution system actually works in India, right? At the central government, at the central level, there is a procurement of the food grains. Now, these procured food grains is distributed to the various state governments. Now, the state governments will identify the beneficiary through the fair price shops. Through fair price shops, FPS. Through the fair price shops, these food grains will be distributed to the beneficiaries. So, this particular infrastructure that has been created, this kind of a system which has been created is called as public distribution system. Okay. PD, yes, public distribution system. Okay. What is fiscal stimulus? Fiscal stimulus basically represents policies of the government, right? Generally, in order to promote recovery in certain sectors. I'll repeat the statement. Fiscal stimulus refers to certain policies of the government, which are used by the government in order to promote recovery in a particular sector. For example, all of you heard of, again, this is useless now. Don't start reading about all of this. All of you heard of Atmanirbhar Bharat package, which was announced in 2020. Let me know. Right? All of you heard of Atmanirbhar Bharat package, which was announced by government in 2020. As a part of Atmanirbhar Bharat package, government announced a huge amount of stimulus. Stimulus means, again, assistance. Government announced a huge amount of stimulus to various sectors. For example, civil aviation market, stimulus was provided. Right? Real estate, stimulus was provided. Agriculture sector, stimulus was provided. Manufacturing sector, stimulus was provided. MSME sector, stimulus was provided. So, argument of stimulus is very simple here. Certain policies are introduced by the government, basically either in the form of incentives or let's say subsidies, etc., wherein government will provide right these kind of stimulus or let's say system or let's say certain policies in order to promote recovery in particular sectors. That is called as a fiscal stimulus. Okay. Any other question? Any other question? Core inflation. What is this core inflation? Core inflation, please understand this. Imagine you are calculating CPI using 299 articles. Remember this, right? CPI, we use 299 articles. We calculate CPI using 299 articles. But the concern is simple. The concern is that out of 299 articles, let's say hypothetically there are 10 articles. Let's say hypothetically there are 10 articles or 10 commodities where the prices have increased by a very, very large margin. Very, very high jump in the prices of these commodities. For example, petrol, wheat, onion, tomato, rice, etc. I'm taking all current affairs examples. Okay, that is in simple terms, food and fuel articles. Food and fuel articles. So now the concern is that because of food and fuel articles, the overall inflation rate will also increase by large margin. All of you okay with this? Now that is point number one. Point number two, please tell me the variation, the fluctuation that you're observing in food and fuel prices, are these permanent in nature or they are temporary in nature? Let me know. The variation or the volatility that you're seeing, let's say, like tomato prices, a very interesting answers. Some of you are saying these are permanent in nature. My dear, do you think tomato prices have always remained at 200 rupees per kg? Think of it. Please think of it. Tomato prices have always remained 200 rupees per kg. Onion prices have always remained 100 rupees per kg. No, these are temporary in nature. These are short-lived. Temporary means these are short-lived. These are not constant. These are short-lived. Today they could be higher. Tomorrow they could fall down. So the argument is simple. Some of the prices are volatile in nature. I hope you understand. Right? These are volatile. Volatile in the sense fluctuating. But because the prices either external factor or because of internal factor, because the price have increased to a very large margin, today CPI will also be very, very high. But after 2 months, right, CPI will fall down. Right? Don't you think that will create certain uncertainty in the policy making? Because CPI is used for various policies in India. That is the precise reason. What we do is, out of these, all the commodities that are listed, right, that is in the basket, we will remove some of the commodities. We will not include the prices of these commodities and calculate how much price variation has happened for remaining commodities. So remember this, if I exclude these commodities whose prices are short-lived in nature, temporary in nature, and calculate inflation for remaining, it is called as core. But if I calculate for all the 299 articles, it is called as headline. It is called as headline. Okay. What is GDP at current prices and constant prices? Whenever you take, let's say today, that is this year. Today the remote price is let's say 150 rupees. If I calculate GDP using whatever is the market price in that year, this is called as a GDP at current market prices. All of you okay with this? I'll repeat it again. If I calculate GDP using whatever is the market price of the product in that year, I'll call this as a GDP at current market prices, or else this is also called as nominal GDP. But the argument is, over a period of time, from last year to this year, from this year to next year, there will be inflation. And because of inflation, market price of the product will keep on changing. Now what I will do is, rather than using the market price of the remote in the current year, what was the price of the remote in the base year? I repeat, what was the price of the remote in the base year will be chosen, and using the base year price, I will calculate GDP. That is called as a GDP at constant prices, or else this is called as real GDP. This is called as real GDP. Okay, done. So that is basically the idea of a nominal GDP and a real GDP. What is marginal standing facility? Marginal standing facility basically means it is a type of quantitative set of tool which is available to RBI, under which the banks which have excess money, the banks which have excess deposits, they will keep deposits with RBI. On this, RBI will pay certain rate of interest to the bank. Very simple. RBI will collect a deposit from the banking sector and will pay rate of interest to the bank. This is called as a standing deposit facility. They are asking standing deposit facility. Standing deposit facility. This is a standing deposit facility. There's one more question on the marginal standing facility. I'll come to that also. Standing deposit facility. This is called as standing deposit facility. SDF. So I'll repeat it. Under SDF, standing deposit facility, RBI will collect deposits from the banking sector and will pay certain rate of interest to the banks. And RBI will not be collecting RBI will not be keeping any collateral, any security to the bank. That is the beauty of standing deposit facility. On the other side, what is marginal standing facility? Marginal standing facility. Now understand this very carefully. Let's say here is a bank. This bank requires money only for very short duration. I'll repeat the statement. This bank requires money only for short duration. Let's say for one day purposes, for overnight purposes. What this bank can do is, they can go to another bank, borrow from another bank. Is it okay? They can go to another bank, borrow from another bank. This will happen in which market? Call money market. All of you okay with this? This can happen in the call money market. But what if there is a situation which arises where there is no extra money with bank 2 to provide loan to bank 1? Can this happen? Of course, yes, this happens. Very recently it has happened. I'll repeat, what if there's a situation wherein bank 2 does not have money to lend to bank 1? That extra funds are not available with bank 2. So how can funds be not available for bank 2? What if I say there is a large amount of withdrawals from this bank? There is let's say festival season and the customers are continuously withdrawing money. Or let's say this is towards a tax payment season. A lot of customers are withdrawing money to pay taxes to the government of India. So I hope you understand there can be multiple reasons why bank 2 may not have extra funds to provide loans to bank 1 for a very short duration. So which means in the call money market, sufficient funds are not available. In call money market, the funds have dried out. In that situation, this bank can approach RBI, Reserve Bank of India, borrow for very short duration. Right? Let's say for one day, overnight purposes. This is called as a marginal standing facility. Is it okay? This is called as marginal standing facility. Okay. Done. What is marginal cost of funds? Marginal means any small change. Marginal means very small change. If let's say hypothetically, a bank is borrowing from different sources. So what do you mean by bank is borrowing from different sources? Bank is taking money from, let's say, Reserve Bank of India. Will it pay rate of interest to RBI? Yes. Bank is collecting deposits. From, let's say, a company, such as fixed deposit. Will it pay rate of interest to a company? Yes. Bank is, let's say, collecting deposits from individuals, such as you and me. Will it pay rate of interest to us? Of course, yes. It will pay rate of interest to us as well. So whenever the bank will collect deposits like this, it will pay rate of interest. Now, can I calculate what is the average rate of interest here? What is the average rate of interest? That is, what the average rate of interest that is paid by the bank whenever they are borrowing from different sources? Of course, yes. You can do the calculation, but again, not required. What is the average rate of interest? You can calculate. Now, what if I say repo rate has increased? Please tell me. What if I say repo rate has increased? Can I say average rate of interest, that is cost of funds for the banks, will change, but marginally? Let me know. All of you okay with this? Right? The repo rate has increased, which means the cost of funds, average rate of interest that is paid by the bank, has changed marginally. This is basically nothing but marginal cost of funds. It might increase only by 0.05%. It might increase by only 0.002%. That is marginal cost of funds. Okay. What is GDP deflator? GDP deflator is basically a representation of overall inflation in the economy. Overall inflation in the economy. How so? What is the formula for GDP deflator? GDP deflator is basically nominal GDP divided by real GDP. Right? Nominal GDP divided by real GDP. Right? Let's say hypothetically you calculate GDP for 1 year using 2 prices. Let's say hypothetically using the current market prices, your GDP value is 300 crore rupees. Okay, let's say hypothetically using the current market prices, your value GDP is 300 crore. And using the base year prices, your GDP value is 200 crore rupee. Now please tell me, if the constant GDP, that is the GDP at constant prices, that is real GDP is 200 crore and your nominal GDP is 300 crore, can I simply say the difference is because there is an inflation between the base year as well as current year? Correct or not? Let me know. Nominal GDP, current market prices, real GDP, constant prices, base year prices. If the real GDP is 200 crore, nominal GDP is 300 crore, why is there a difference? Because there is inflation. Because in the 2011, 12 to 23, there is inflation. Because of inflation, the nominal GDP is much higher. And if you get this as 1.5, GDP deflated is 1.5 here. What is the indication? What is the inference? Can I say based on this information? Can I say compared to the base year, in this year, inflation is 50%? Think of it and do let me know. Compared to base year, in this year, inflation rate is 50%. Inflation rate, that is price levels, have increased by 50%. That is the reason we say GDP deflator is a true indicator, is much better indicator of inflation in the economy. And another name for GDP deflator is what? Implicit price deflator. Implicit price deflator. Okay. Done. So this is basically the idea of a GDP deflator. Define surcharges and cess in taxation system. Surcharges are those additional taxes. Underline the term additional taxes. Surcharges are those additional taxes which are imposed and collected by the government, and none of this, there is no compulsion. There is no compulsion on the government to distribute these surcharges with the states. There is no compulsion. If the central government wants to keep it, they will keep it with themselves, and if they want to distribute, they will distribute with the states, and there is no compulsion. Whereas the cesses are also additional types of taxes which are imposed by the government in order to achieve a certain objective. I repeat, cesses are also additional taxes which are imposed by the government in order to achieve a certain objective. Please tell me, do you remember GST compensation cess? Do you remember GST compensation cess? What was the objective of GST compensation cess? Objective of GST compensation cess was to provide compensation. So whenever they talk about cess, there is an objective. There is an objective. Only for objective, they will impose the taxes. These are called as cesses. Now, another point, common for both surcharges and cesses. In case of cesses, there is no compulsion on the central government to distribute that or share that with the states. If the center wants it, they can distribute. If the center doesn't want it, they cannot, or there is no compulsion on them for the distribution purposes. Okay. What is public account and public debt? Public account is basically, Are Baba, there are two students who are simply copying and pasting everything that we have discussed in economics. Everything. Right, so a public account is a type of account. In polity, have you not come across public account? Article 266, Article 267, 3 types of accounts are there. Right, so public account is a type of account where Government of India has the responsibility, right, through executive authority, either to deposit or withdraw money. They do not require any permission from the Parliament. Whereas public debt basically represents what is the liability of Government of India whenever they borrowed money from the market. Whenever government has borrowed money from the market, how much is the liability? How much is the debt that they owe to the market? For example, Government of India will issue, let's say, 5-year G security. Is it part of the public debt? Yes, because after 5 years they will have to repay it. Government of India will issue a 10-year government security. Right? Government of India will borrow from World Bank for, let's say, 20 years. Government of India will borrow from another country for 30 years. All of that is the public debt of Government of India. Okay. Can India target and impose restrictions on a single country? If India does that, can WTO target impose restrictions to India? India cannot target only one country. I hope you understand this. India cannot target only one country. Right? Please understand. Again, provided there is a concept of most favored nation. If this country is not part of a most favored nation list of a country, definitely yes, you can have a different tariffs altogether. But because the trading partners have a most favored nation status, if you target only one country and say, right, I'm going to impose taxes on this product, then the country will drag you to WTO. Then the WTO will set up authority or committee to look into it. And if the committee finds out that you're actually violating the MFN principle of WTO, you're violating, let's say, other agreements under WTO, you are asked to withdraw those kind of tariffs. And if you don't withdraw those types of tariffs, then the other country, which is suffering because of your tariff, they will be given the right to impose a retaliatory tariff on you. That will happen. Okay. How to deal with prelims 2023 trend for economics? So should I change my strategy on multiple revision and practicing mocks and PYQs is sufficient? My recommendation is practice multiple mocks. Practice multiple mocks. And again, I kept on telling you this. Do not worry about what kind of options are given. Compared to earlier year, what has changed this year? Elimination technique is gone. I hope you understand. Elimination technique is gone. Not for you, for everyone. Right? It's not just that UPSC is targeting only one student in the exam. For everyone, elimination technique is gone. In that case, what will happen? One, difficulty level will increase. Second, even if there is no elimination technique, your concepts are clear, your fundamentals are clear, I don't think so that will become a problem for you. Right? So again and again, I've been telling about only one point. Keep your concepts clear. Keep your concepts clear. Okay. What is vote on account and interim budget? Vote on account simply means, understand this, vote on account simply means government will not announce a full year budget. Government will announce expenditures only for, let's say, next 60 days. Only for next 2 months. Why? Let's say in the next 60 days, elections will be conducted, new government will be formed, and the new government will take care of the expenditure part as well as the revenue part after that elections are over. So only for a certain period, the government will announce expenditures in the budget. That is called as vote on account. Whereas the interim budget is announced for full financial year, just like a normal budget. Just like a normal budget for full financial year, the complete expenditure part as well as the income part is announced by the government. That is called as the interim budget. Okay. I will give my exam in 2025, so I can make economics notes from them. Yes, you can do that. So what is MSP? MSP stands for minimum support price. MSP stands for minimum support price. What is this minimum support price? It is the price which will be paid by the government, irrespective of the market prices, whenever they procure food grains from the market. I will repeat the statement. What is the minimum support price? It is the price which is announced by the government, paid by the government, whenever they procure the food grain from the market, irrespective of market prices. Whatever could be the market price. It could be higher than MSP, it could be lower than MSP, doesn't matter. Government will procure the food grain at this price itself. That is called as minimum support price. Government generally announces MSP before the sowing season starts. And the argument of the government is, they want to provide information to the farmer before the farmer can start sowing the crop. Right? A farmer should have information to decide what crops they want to sow, and that is the reason before the sowing season, government announces MSP. Government generally announces MSP for more than 20 crops. The recommendation is given by CACP, Commission for Agriculture Cost and Prices, and right, this will be taken up by Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, CCA. And right now, Government of India announces 150%. MSP that the government announces is 150% of cost of production. COP stands for cost of production. Why does government announce 150%? If your cost of production is, let's say, 100 rupee, government says, I want to give you extra 50 rupee returns. I repeat, if your cost of production 100 rupee, government says, I want to give you extra 50% returns. That's the reason 150% of cost of production. Okay? And these are certain important points regarding concept of minimum support price. What is near and rear? I'll repeat the statements here. Please remember this very carefully. Both the near and rear are indices. Both the near and rear are indices. And if you have not understood anything, please remember only this, more than sufficient. Both the near and rear are indices. Point number 1. Both are published by Reserve Bank of India. Point number 3. Near basically calculates, it's an index. It calculates what is the value of rupee against a basket of currencies. Simple. It calculates what is happening to value of rupee against a basket of currencies. And if near index goes up, or goes down, it simply means value of a rupee against a basket of currencies is either going up or going down. For example, I hope you remember this. I told you like this. Imagine if 1 rupee is equal to, let's say, $5. Just a simple example. If 1 rupee is equal to $5 and this 1 rupee is equal to $6. In terms of index, the index number has increased. But what has happened to the value of rupee? The value of rupee, can I say, value of rupee has increased here? All of you okay with this? Value of rupee in this example has increased, value of rupee has appreciated, whereas value of dollar has depreciated. So same way, if near index goes up, it simply means the value of rupee against basket of currency has increased, it has appreciated. If a near index will fall down, value of rupee has gone down, value of rupee has depreciated against a basket of currencies. Simply remember this. What about rear? Rear represents a trade competitiveness. It represents a trade competitiveness. What do you mean by trade competitiveness? We are measuring what is the value or how much is India's trade competitiveness. That is, let's say, I'm keeping the good of India on one side, and against this, I'm measuring basket of goods from different countries. So what is happening to trade competitiveness of India is measured using real effective exchange rate. And if real effective exchange rate, that is the index, goes up, trade competitiveness will come down. If it is going down, the index number is going down, trade competitiveness is increasing. Simply remember this, more than sufficient. Do not buy hard formulas, do not buy hard calculations. It is useless for GS paper 3. What is GAR? GAR basically means, right, the concept of, GAR basically represents a framework, general anti-avoidance rules. Under GAR system, what we are trying to do is, there are various arrangements which have been happening or which have been taking place, which have already done between two suppliers or two sellers, two companies in the market. Now we want to find out whether they are using these arrangements to avoid taxes. I repeat, the whole idea of a GAR is, it will evaluate the agreements or arrangements between two parties, and we are trying to find out whether because of this arrangement have they avoided taxation. If they have avoided taxation, then we'll simply say this is an impermissible avoidance agreement. Whatever taxes they have avoided, whatever tax benefit they have enjoyed, we will reimpose the taxes and collect from them. That is the concept of general anti-avoidance rules. Okay. Here's the question: is national income and GDP one and the same? No, my dear. National income generally, whenever they talk about national income, they talk about net national product, NNP. Whenever they use the term national income, they use NNP for that. Right? But generally, specifically talking, it is NNP. But generally, GDP is used by many countries to represent national income. But if you talk technically, right, it is a net national product. And I hope you remember why net national product is so important. Okay. Does UPSC ask calculation or not? My dear, UPSC, tell me, have you seen previous year questions? My only concern is, have you seen previous year questions? If you say yes, sir, I've seen previous year questions, then tell me, have they asked anywhere? Have they asked calculations? And the student says no. Why are you not seeing previous year questions? Why have you not seen previous year questions? I don't understand. Then what are you doing? My dear, is it not your duty to see or look at Glassdoor previous year question papers? Yes, this is your duty. Right? Don't expect the faculty to do everything. I've seen previous year questions, but don't you think that's your duty to see? Yes. Right. So UPSC will never ask you questions on calculation. They will never ask you that. Don't worry. Okay. So that is which type of a system? Is it destination based or origin based? My dear, it is more of a destination based. Why? Right, if a product moves from one state to another state, we have discussed all of this, by the way. If this product will be manufactured in state 1, consumed in state 2, VAT will be collected by which state? You tell me that. Simple question. This remote control is manufactured in state 1. It is consumed in state 2. VAT will be collected by which state? Do you think it will be collected by state 1? No, it will be collected by second state. It will be collected by the second state. That is the reason it is a destination based. Okay. So when India's GDP is increasing significantly, then why India's poverty and unemployment is still? When India's GDP is increasing significantly, then why India's poverty and unemployment is still declining? What do you mean by this? I'm unable to understand the question only. When India's GDP is increasing significantly, why India's poverty is still declining? It should decline, no? Does it make sense or not? It should decline. If GDP increases, more people are getting jobs. It should decline. Okay. Is it possible to have increase in growth with low inflation or zero inflation? With low inflation, yes, you can achieve that. Zero inflation is not preferred. Why do you want to have zero inflation? You should not have zero inflation. Why? If there is no inflation, there is no incentive for the manufacturers. If you're manufacturing a product at 10 rupee through perpetuity, then what is the incentive for you to produce more? The incentive generally is provided by higher prices. Right? That's the reason. Zero inflation is not required. Healthy rate of inflation, right? 4%. That's the reason in case of India we kept it at 4%. What are the advantages and disadvantages for having 1 rupee becoming equal to $1? Right? If a rupee appreciates, you tell me what is the advantage? What will happen to imports and exports? And answer to my question: if a rupee appreciates, what is the advantage of imports and exports? Do you remember that? When rupee depreciates, what will happen to import? When rupee appreciates, what will happen to import? If rupee depreciates, what will happen to export and import? Apply the same logic. Right? If rupee appreciates, what will happen to imports? Imports will become very cheap. Can that destroy manufacturing? In India? Can it affect investments in India? Of course, yes. Do you think with rupee appreciation, $1 is equal to 1 rupee, more and more jobs will be generated in India? What is the advantage? No advantage for the foreign investors. But on the other side, definitely yes, imports will become very cheaper for us. Right? Let's say petrol and diesel, assuming government will not change the taxes, either the central or state, imports will become very cheaper for us. Exports will lose out competitiveness. Right? So they will become very costly because it doesn't matter whether this product is manufactured in India or USA. It will cost the same for them, $1 only. So that's the reason exports will lose out competitiveness. Imports will become very cheap. Okay. Why do we use a GDP to calculate our economy even it is not giving proper conditions of our population? That's the reason, my dear. Have you come across a multi-dimensional poverty index very recently? Let me know. GDP is important. No doubt, GDP is important. But who said GDP is the only indicator that you need to track if you talk about a social welfare? Let me know. Has anybody told you if you want to talk about social welfare, GDP is the only factor that you need to consider? Of course, no. Right? right? That's the reason, right? What is the multinational dimensional poverty index? Is it not important? Of course, yes, right? How many people are poor in India, right? How much is the, right, let's say welfare infrastructure such as sanitation, right, rural roads, healthcare, etc. All of that is important. So GDP will only give you economic growth, right? It's a quantitative concept. It will give you economic growth, right? That's the reason. Apart from GDP also, we have many more indicators, right? Best example in recent times is multidimensional poverty index. Okay. So I'm not able to write answers in economy, but in geography and polity, my answer writing is good. Practice. You need practice. That's it. You need practice. Read more, practice more. For example, sir, how do we read? Right? What do we read, etc., etc. For example, today's Hindu newspaper. I don't know how many of you have seen, and many of you believe Saturday, Sunday is holiday for me. I don't read newspapers, etc., etc. Today's newspaper. There's a very nice article on right, the problems in China. Hindu newspaper I'm talking about. Today's newspaper, Hindu newspaper. There's a very nice article, right? Editorial article, open editorial article. Problems in China and what is the repercussion of Chinese economic problems on international economy. For example, right? India. If there is some problem in China, will it affect Indian economy? Of course, yes, it will have a huge impact even on the Indian economy because we have got a huge trade relationship with China. So my argument is, if you want to improve the quality of answer, practice more, read more, practice more, right? Automatically the quality of answer will keep on improving over a period of time. Okay, done. Any other question? Why India is still a developing country? Right? That answer you already know. Right? Our GDP compared to other countries is very, very low. Right? Will it become a developed country in the future? Let's hope for the best. Right? Again, please understand. Let's hope for the best. Right? Because I cannot simply say yes, definitely it will become a developed country because then you'll ask me a question in which year. Right? Nobody knows. Nobody knows when exactly India will become a developed country. Our best hope is maybe let's say in another 10 years, 20 years, by 100 years of independence, will become a developed country. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? How much percentage of economics paper is from current affairs? There's no fixed percent, but I will say that based on the past experience. 80 to 90% of economics will be from current affairs. You can check in the previous papers, both prelims as well as mains. Check both. That's very important. Check both the prelims as well as mains. Around 80 to 90% of the questions will come from current affairs, right? Especially in prelims. And most of the questions will be from current affairs. Okay. Any questions? You have any idea? Every question, remember every time? What do you mean by that? I don't know. Please rephrase. Please rephrase. Difference between GVA and GDP. That was the first question that I've answered. That was the second question, I guess. We have discussed all of this. Okay. What should the strategy regarding 2024 UPSC? Okay, again, I've told you this in the last class, I'll repeat it. If you ask me, this is an advice to you. This is an advice to you. Your strategy should be very simple. So what should be my strategy? And I would say, follow these particular points. Again, this is my recommendation to you. Just like any committee will give a recommendation to government, this is my recommendation to you. It is entirely up to you whether you want to follow this recommendation or not. Point number one, you'll have to revise your static portion. Revise the static portion. So how many times? Entirely left to you. You want to revise it 2 times, 3 times, etc., etc., entirely left to you. Second one is update current affairs. And I will give more emphasis on current affairs. And if you've attended my class, you will know this. I will give a lot of importance to current affairs. Read as much as possible current affairs. So read static portion, revise it. Second, update current affairs. Third one, solving previous year questions plus mock papers. Solving previous year questions plus mock papers. Right? Do it as much as possible. Do it as much as possible. Right? So this will be my 3-point strategy for you. Try to do it as much as possible. Right? Update your current affairs. So how many sources do I need for current affairs? It is entirely left to you. You want to use a magazine? Complete current affairs dependent on magazine. Stick to magazine only. Sir, I want to read 5 newspapers every day. Then stick to 2 or 3 newspapers every day. Please, you'll have to read one of these sources. Do not make a mistake of not reading current affairs. So static, right? So some of you ask, sir, my fundamentals are very, very weak. In that case, what should I do? I would simply say within your static reading, include NCERT as well. In that case, if your fundamentals are very weak, include NCERT as well. Include NCERT. Right? Read NCERT books as well. 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. Sir, any list for this? There is a PPT which has already been provided to you. List of NCERTs are there. Read from there. Okay. That. So static, current affairs, question papers. If you can do this consistently for both prelims as well as mains, I don't think that you'll find this economic paper very, very difficult. Of course, yes, even after this, please take my advice. Please take my advice. You might criticize me, but please take it. After doing all of this, right, recurringly, consistently, there will be some questions for which you will not know the answers. Perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. Why? Can you with guarantee say you have read 100% of current affairs? Absolutely no. So do not be under the impression that you'll be able to score 15 out of 15 economics questions. Do not be under that impression. And you should not target that. That is over ambitious. Why? And there will be so much of current affairs. So much of current affairs. And so many concepts that even if you read all the current affairs concepts, you will not be able to remember some of them. So that is the reason. Right? Even if you read everything that is in the current affairs, there will be 1 or 2 questions for which you will not know the answer. Perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. Right? So that is the reason. Do not target 15 out of 15 in the prelims. That's very, very ambitious. Very, very ambitious. Right? Your target should be, let's say, out of 15, 80% correct answers. 80% correct answers. That will be an excellent job for Indian economy. Done? Okay. Sir, we have successfully landed Chandrayaan 3, but so many people criticizing that why should not focus on India. Don't worry about it. I'll give my exam in 2025. So when we'll start making notes from current affairs? Let's say your exam in T25, whatever the month is, 12 to 15 months prior to this. 12 to 15 months prior to whatever month you're giving exam. That should be your target area. That should be your target for current affairs. Okay. Anything else? Any other question? Any other questions you people have? Otherwise, we will end the class then. For basic from which class? 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. Explain about NABARD. All of that is not required, right? Whatever static information you have in the book, read it. When it was established, it will come under RBI, right? It will provide loans for promotion of agriculture sector, rural development. It basically looks after cooperatives, cooperative banks, right? NABARD. That is the most important authority. More than sufficient. Okay. Tax buoyancy. Whenever there's a change in the GDP from one year to next year, when the GDP changes, as a result of this, how much is the change in the taxes collected? So what is the change in the taxes collected divided by the change in the GDP number? This is called as a tax buoyancy. Right? So when GDP increases from one year to next year, automatically the taxes collected should also change. That is tax buoyancy. Okay. So which newspaper? Hindu or Indian Express? Left to you. Left to you. Again, please understand. Some of you use the term, sir, which is the best newspaper? There is no best book. There is no best newspaper. Let's stop that. There is no best book. If I say this is the best book, everybody will run to that book. I know that. But there is no best book. There is no best newspaper. According to your requirement, you choose any one of them. Okay. So help me in choosing optional subject. Right, my dear, I'll tell you simply two things. Again, this is my personal view, my personal viewpoint. Whenever you want to choose an optional paper, follow two very simple fundas. One is, am I able to understand this optional paper or not? Am I able to understand the subject or not? That should be very important. Do not run behind only marks. Right? Only understanding is it relevant? That is also not relevant. So 2 points. One, am I able to understand this subject? Second one is this particular subject scoring enough in the UPSC? Is the subject scoring enough in the UPSC? For example, you might feel, right? You might have read certain interviews of the toppers. You might feel economics, mathematics are scoring subjects, and they are. Provided there's a condition. And many toppers will have chosen mathematics paper optional. Many toppers would have chosen economics as an optional. But please let me know, if you're finding GS paper 3 difficult, do you think economics is the right optional for you? If you're finding GS paper 3 difficult, do you think mathematics is the right optional for you? Absolutely no. Absolutely no. So I hope you understand. Right? Remember 2 points. Again, this is my personal viewpoint. You can have your own, right? Let's say way to find out optional. This is my personal viewpoint. Whenever you choose an optional, keep your focus on 2 things. One, UPSC does it provide good marks, right? When you look at the rankings for these optional paper. For example, how many of you know that you can choose botany as an optional? And some of you might be hearing the term botany for the first time. Do not panic. Not required for you. How many of you know that you can choose management as optional for UPSC paper? You can choose agriculture as optional for UPSC means. But please see, how many of the toppers have taken these? How many of the toppers are from agriculture? That is, they have chosen optional as agriculture. How many of the toppers have chosen botany as their optional paper? How many have chosen zoology as their optional? You will not find many takers. Why? These subjects generally are not scoring enough. And that's the reason, right? For example, somebody from a management background, MBA, would have taken Pali as their optional. Right? Would have taken, right, let's say, some literature subject as optional. Would have taken, right, let's say, geography as their optional. Would have taken history as their optional. Why? If you look at the historical trend in UPSC, generally these subjects have scored enough, or let's say it is easier to score in these subjects compared to some other technical subjects. That's the reason this is my advice to you. Choose your optional carefully. Consider these 2 factors. Okay. Sir, how many infrastructure projects one should learn for different types of construction like roads or railways? What do you mean by how many types of infrastructure projects? If you're talking about examples, specific examples, not required. Whatever is there in the current affairs, you can take it and put it as an example. What is a zero coupon instrument? The zero coupon instruments are those instruments which are issued at discounted prices. For example, if the instrument has, let's say, a face value of 100, they will not issue it at 100, they will issue it at less than 100 rupees. And upon maturity, they will give you whatever is the face value. Such instruments are called as zero coupon instruments. Okay. Again, don't ask me which subject is good, which subject is that, etc., etc. You're asking an economics faculty. Right? Obviously, I'll be biased towards economics. Right? So I hope you understand. There are different subjects. Like literature subjects are there. Sociology is, right? Many of the times people take sociology. Anthropology people take. Right? People take even geography. Right? People take economics. People take mathematics, etc. A lot of subjects are scoring. Okay. Silicon Valley Bank, again, not required. Not required. If you want to learn about Silicon Valley Bank, the discussion is already there on the YouTube, done by me only. You can have a look at it. But for UPSC right now, no use of Silicon Valley Bank. So for economics also, should we need to quote many examples? If there are current affairs examples, quote them. That will fetch you good marks. So tell the name of all the business newspapers, also the name which newspaper available free of cost. My dear, there is only one newspaper as far as I'm concerned which is available free of cost. That is Financial Express. Apart from that, you want Mint. There is a subscription available for you. You want Business Line, you want Hindu, you want Indian Express. All of them are available for subscription. Right. So I generally read Hindu newspaper. I generally read Hindu, Indian Express, Business Standard. I read Business Line. Right, I read Mint newspaper as well as Financial Express. Generally, I read around 6 to 7 newspapers every day. But do you need to read that much? No, that much reading is not required for you. You don't require so much of a newspaper reading. That's the reason every time whenever I've discussed about newspaper reading, I've told you only one point. Do not just stick to Hindu newspaper. Please read one more newspaper in addition to Hindu. That should be more than sufficient. Okay, done. Any other question you people have? Optional management is good or not? That you please check, Baba. I don't know how many toppers are there in the last couple of years. You check it. Okay. Are you doing weekly economic current affairs? No, we are not doing it now. Any other questions? Otherwise, we can stop the discussion. Any other questions? Please read current affairs. Please read current affairs. This is my advice to you. Please read current affairs as much as possible. Read current affairs. Rather than reading 10 books, read one book and read current affairs more. This is my simple advice to you. Okay. What is round tripping? Round tripping basically means, right? Again, take from current affairs and again, let me talk. Then let me not take the company's name or etc. Imagine I'm the investor. Rather than me investing directly in India, I will route the investments back to India through one more country or through series of countries. Is it okay? I can directly invest, but rather than investing directly, I will route my investment from other countries. This is called as round tripping. Right? You might ask me, sir, why are you doing round tripping? Right? So argument is simple here. What if the amount of money that I have is black money? If I directly make an investment into Indian market, I might be caught by income tax officials. So there are various reasons why investors generally use a round tripping mechanism to invest back in India. Right? So investments will start from India, again will come back to Indian economy itself. Because you're taking a round like this, starting and ending in the same point, it is called as round tripping. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Anything else? Am I teaching economics optionals? No. We do not have classes for economics optionals at Byju's. Okay, done. So done. Let's stop the discussion here. Okay, let's stop the discussion here. So let's see when again the economic doubt session will be arranged. Right? Is it a class for economics new batch? No, this is not a class for economics new batch. The economics new batch will start again after 1 month. I believe it is there in the month of October. The annual calendar is there with you. Please have a look at it. Right. So I believe it is there in the month of October again. And after that, I believe somewhere in the mid-November, right, we are going to have again morning batch and next month in the evening batch. Okay. So you have the annual calendar. please look into the annual calendar, right? And accordingly, whichever subject is pending to you, please attend those classes. Okay, done. So take care. Read. My advice to you people would be simple. Do not complicate. Please do not complicate economics. I know economics is a very technical subject. I know for a fact. You do not complicate it. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Read static, update current affairs, revise as much as possible, and write or attend the test papers. That should take care of your economics preparation. Done. So take care. All the best. See you again next time. Okay.